Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're based in the world. It's Sabrina Khan, founder and host of FuelYourselfFabulous.tv. And my mission really for this platform is to play a vital role in the overall awareness of health and vitality for women, and through that process, revive the way they eat, move, live, and think. And I'm sort of really passionate about the area of sort of health, wellness, vitality, because certain things I've suffered all my life. So I've had to become aware of it. And in the Asian community, sort of food as medicine, the whole lifestyle approach, Ayurveda is very, very big. So I've always had an interest in it for that reason as well. Last year I went through a really bad scare period where I really thought I had something a lot worse than I did have. I thought I had the big C. I can't even sort of say this because it's such a scary thought. And recently, just sort of through sort of healthy living, healthy eating, reducing stress, exercise, I've actually got rid of my cholesterol, because like 4 or 5 years ago I was diagnosed with high cholesterol. So living healthy in a holistic way, I think it's a really good area, especially because we're living in an age where there's so much disease and chronic illness. So this kind of information, I think, is imperative to share. And my whole theme really kicked off with digestive health, because me personally, I've suffered with it for such a long time. And the more I started researching it, the more I realized why it's imperative overall health, and what a big problem it actually is, because 1 in 5 people have it, more women than men. And apparently it's the second largest reason why people are off work. Well, a certain facet of digestive health, IBS, and yeah, it's the second biggest reason why people are off work after the common cold. So digestive health is my topic today, and I've got a wonderful guest to share her knowledge and story. But can I remind you that this is a live interactive show? So if you've got any questions, if you go right to the bottom of the page, and you can leave the questions there. So yeah, so enjoy the show. But my guest today is Anne Pemberton, who's a functional medicine practitioner, and she's a best-selling author of The Vitamin Cure. And that you were actually a nurse, were you, Anne? But there's a reason why you got sort of pulled into the whole food as medicine, medicine practicing field. There's a reason for that. So do you want to share your story with us?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Sabrina. Yeah, my background is nursing, as you've quite rightly said. And the reason I got into this was because the Lord gave me a son who eventually had a diagnosis of autism, and I didn't really know where to turn. So prior to not really having much education apart from my nursing degree, I went back to university to try and find some answers. And eventually I kind of did a round circuit through psychology, through teaching, and then into nutrition, which really lent itself to what I was doing. And over the course of time, I also, because of all the stress of trying to cope with what life threw at us as a family, I also got chronic fatigue myself. So at the time my son was diagnosed with autism, I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue. And I just thought, well, the world's ended. And that's when I really got into nutrition. So realizing that some of his physical symptoms were similar to what I was experiencing with the chronic fatigue, I thought, well, whatever I do for him, I'll do for me, and we'll do it together. And then no one's been singled out and made to be different. And so that's what we did. I met a lovely chappie called Paul Shattuck, who gave me a lot of education on something called leaky gut, which was the thing that really motivated me. So, you know, looking at what's happening in his gut that is making him behave the way he does. And so that was really revolutionary for me. I was told that he'd always be a 3-year-old little boy, so go away and enjoy him. And I'm pleased to say he's 28 now, and he's got his own master's degree. He's been to university, obviously. He's got a fantastic job. He earns lots of money. He's got lots of friends. So he's far surpassed what was expected. And so really, the nutrition side wasn't a career move for me until kind of early on in that process, when I found out that actually this is worth its salt and it's worth pursuing. So seeing the difference in him made me think, well, there might be a few more out there I can help, so that's good.
Yeah, that's what normally happens. Sort of, it's my own personal story, and a lot of sort of healers, survivors that I read about. Sort of, they've had they're a survivor of cancer, or they're a survivor of diabetes, and it's through nutrition and lifestyle. So it's really a fascinating area. But just to go back to sort of how you were diagnosed with chronic fatigue, and your son had autism, what kind of physical symptoms were the same? What, you said there was like a similarity that you were seeing between yourselves?
Yeah, it was more the aches and pains, because with chronic fatigue, that can be different for different people. I deal a lot with chronic fatigue and autism now. They're my specialist areas. And what I see is a lot of people who just don't have the energy. But then I also see people who have loads of energy, but yet they have a lot of aches and pains because they can't get the energy to the muscles. And what I noticed with my son was I was feeding my younger boy, because I had a younger boy at the time, and this particular son was just that opposite. And a mum looks at a child sometimes and sees that they feel lonely.
Yes.
I said to him, come and sit with mummy. And he came and jumped on the settee, and I put my arm around him, and he said, "Ooh, that hurts." And I just thought, ooh, that's not very good. This kid's 2.5 years old, and all I'm doing is cuddling him, and it hurts. So that made me think, well, actually, we're not that different.
Yeah.
And that kind of pushed me forward, really. So I started to do my research from there. And because there was a lot of research coming through about autism, but not very much about chronic fatigue, I started to think, well, actually, probably from a functional medicine perspective, they have got an underlying cause that's similar. Yeah. So that's how I worked with it, really.
Right. Okay. And in the past, we've discussed why stress actually has such a big impact on your digestive health. So yeah, why does stress have a big impact? I mean, in today's society, everyone's stressed. You're stressed because of your children. You're stressed because, you have to pay the bills. I mean, we do live in a manic, depressive society. So, and I know a lot of my own symptoms are kind of, I mean, once upon a time it used to be a dirty word, but IBS is so common now. My own symptoms are triggered by stress, but I've learned a lot to control them. So, yeah, why is stress so? Yeah, why is so much of an enemy, and why does it affect like the digestive health so much?
I think part of this is that we don't actually acknowledge stress anymore. Yeah. I think we go around as a society feeling that it's actually okay. And to a degree, in small amounts, stress motivates you. So you do need a little bit to get you motivated. But it's when that becomes either too severe and you're not acknowledging it, or it becomes long-term and chronic. And what happens in the fight or flight response, which is stress, is in evolutionary terms, we used to run away from the saber-toothed tiger, or we used to stay and fight it. And we don't do that anymore. We sit behind a queue of traffic drumming on the wheel of the car. So we're not releasing the adrenaline that the fight or flight response gives us. And so what adrenaline does is it has all these kind of magic things that it takes the blood supply into the peripheries, so the hands and the feet, so that you can run away from the tiger. But in doing that, it shuts down the digestion, because it's not crucial to eat your woolly mammoth while you're running away from the tiger.
No.
It shuts down your digestion. So in a chronic way, digestion starts to shut down. You lose the ability to make hydrochloric acid, which digests your protein, and then as a knock-on effect of that, you have a hormone loop in that system that helps you to make digestive enzymes and secrete those, and then bicarb and bile salts. And if that system isn't working, then you start to get things like IBS, but not just that. Further down in the gut, in the large and small intestine, you've got a whole lot of microbes in there. And we are more microbe than we are cells.
Yes.
And the microbes are there to help you to digest your food, to help you to make B vitamins, so they're your energy vitamins. And under stress, because of the digestive difficulties, the good guys in the gut, they die off as well. So you can end up with an awful lot of bacterial or yeast overgrowth, which then further compounds your problem. And then at that point, the cells in the gut can start to separate a little bit. And so foods that are not fully digested, because that process is not working, you can get protein fragments that leak out into the systemic circulation, and they're what we loosely term as food intolerance.
Ah, right, okay, because that's on the rise as well these days, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And in particular for people with mental health disorders like autism, things like gluten and dairy are really not digested fully at all, and they're broken down into opiate-type compounds. And so the opiate-type compounds end up in the circulation, and the child, if it is a child, can look like they're opiate toxic, so they can look like drug addicts. This causes major mood shifts and aggressive behaviours and sudden changes in behaviours that sometimes parents don't really acknowledge or don't understand. Because we never really, in Western medicine, we've never linked the gut and the brain together before. We are now.
Yeah, you are. Read a lot of reads. Do you want to tell me more about the gut-brain link?
Well, the microbes in the gut actually talk to the brain, and they talk to it, we think, via the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the biggest nerve in the body, and it comes down from the brain through the throat and the esophagus. It wraps itself around the heart, and then it goes into the digestion. And if you've got any kind of irritation within the gut, it can upset the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is really important in stress, because one of its primary functions is to bring us back into parasympathetic nervous system. When you're under stress, you're in sympathetic nervous system, so it's all fight or flight. But the vagus nerve, its responsibility is to bring you back out of that and to relax you again. But in people who are constantly stressed, what happens is it kind of gets strangled with that. You've got a little valve at the top end of your stomach called the hiatus valve.
Yes.
And that can strangle the vagus nerve. So if you're strangling the vagus nerve all the time, it's irritated all the time, so that can cause more stress. So then you get like a two-way thing going on, where the communication from both ends is not correct, so that increases the stress. And that's quite a new area. There's a lovely guy called Stephen Rocklitz who's been talking a lot about this, and he calls it hiatal hernia syndrome vagus nerve imbalance. And there are some really, really simple things that you can do to actually help that, which we've known about for years, but we haven't really known about the vagus nerve involvement. So he's kind of opening up that area, which is lovely.
Yeah, I'm reading a lot about this, and I'm reading a lot about sort of the importance of it. So for our listeners and for our viewers, we know that you should go to the gym, and we know you should do what you want, but just if I was at work and it's a stressful environment and I was getting really stressed, do you just have some simple tips or techniques that people can apply just to reduce their stress a little bit? I mean, I've learned a lot, so I can actually talk about it a little bit as well, but do you have any simple tips that people can start using and applying?
Yeah, the most important one is to breathe properly.
Yes.
People who are stressed just do not breathe properly. And there's a couple of really good systems that you can use. One is HeartMath. I don't know if you've heard of HeartMath. It's a little app you can buy for your phone, and it's almost like a bellows which opens and closes on your phone, like a bit of a kaleidoscope type thing, and you breathe in tune with it, and it tells you how well you're doing and whether you're in sync, and
Oh, wow. Sounds interesting.
It's fabulous, and it's so good for children, and it's so good for anybody because you can do it anytime. You're not watched at, no one's watching you, so you can just do it in your lunch break, or even if you just feel stressed. And once you get used to using that, you can take that concept forward. Another thing I use quite a lot is Butico breathing,
Right.
which was meant for asthmatics.
Mm.
Again, it's all about just getting that breathing pattern established. And if you haven't got either of those, you can get Butico on YouTube for free. You can go and watch how they do it. And basically, all they do is that you breathe in slowly for 5 seconds and then you breathe out slowly and you belly breathe rather than breathing from the chest. So you're actually opening up the whole of the diaphragm.
Mm.
And what that does is it relaxes this sphincter at the top end of the stomach, so it relaxes the vagus nerve and just calms everything down and brings you into parasympathetic, and it is really effective. So, and anyone can do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's breathing, isn't it? I mean, that's exactly what I do. I just sort of start taking long, slow breaths and just concentrate on my breathing. So you're really shutting everything off. And the other one I learned was right nostril breathing, something to do with the left part of the brain being switched off when you're doing that. And that's the part that's the frustrated part. And so just breathing through my right nostril, and it just really calms you down. So if you're not at the gym, or if you're not out walking, or if you just need some really sort of simple tips for that, it's what Anne suggested, and just breathing techniques. And I wanted to ask you, I read this a lot in Facebook groups and forums and stuff, and there's so many sort of symptoms. There's so many kind of digestive problems that people have, like irregular bowel movements is a big one. I mean, again, it's a big taboo subject, and they keep going to, I mean, people get worried because they can't pinpoint it, and they keep going to the doctors, and the doctors don't know what it is. And so how would you sort of console people like that? How would you what kind of advice would you give someone like that who's had, symptoms of just, bowel movement problems, and they've not been for days, or they just can't control it the other way, and the doctors aren't really saying a right lot. So how would you, what advice would you give to people like that?
I get them involved with my clients. I give them a food and activity diary.
Right.
It goes over a week. And for that, they've got to complete everything that they eat, and the timing and the amount, and then how they felt after it, or they experienced. And then when they come back, usually they can start to look at triggers for themselves before they come back to me. And by the time they come back a month later, they've got a fairly good idea of what might be going on.
Yes.
And so all we do then is we sit and we look at the diary and we say, right, okay, what do you think here? And we can pinpoint usually if there's a food that's a problem, if it's many foods, and so we've got this kind of leaky gut or this imbalance of gut bacteria. So we start to look at, well, what can we do to address that? So it might not be taking foods out, because I tend not to like to take a lot of foods out, because people then get really debilitated because they're not eating a wide enough diet.
Yes.
And it's very, very difficult sometimes with some people, if you take too many foods out, to get those foods back in.
Right.
I try and avoid that as much as I can, and I try and get them to recognise themselves what's happening, and to try and get good foods in that will feed and nourish.
Right.
And that will rebalance that gut bacteria. And then maybe you may only need to take one food out that's causing the major problem, or you may not have to take any out, and obviously the latter is preferable. But you're quite right, there are a lot of people coming through now who do have intolerances. And if you don't take that one particular thing out, it can stop the progress. So I think it's each case on its merits.
Yes.
It's whatever works for that person.
But this is actually really good advice, because my last guest advised the same thing. So keeping a food diary is essential, really. What what triggers your symptoms. But so what else apart from food and stress can trigger kind of digestive uneasiness?
Oh, quite a lot of things. Medication can do it.
Yes.
So anyone who's on, say, long-term medication for arthritis, those kind of drugs, so they're kind of the anti-inflammatory type drugs.
Yes.
So the non-steroidals. Anybody who's on long-term steroids, so someone who's maybe got asthma and is using inhalers all the time, they can upset the gut balance. Anybody who's had quite a lot of antibiotics in the past, or has had something like maybe a chest infection that's not shifted and has needed lots of antibiotics in one go. Other ones are children who've had mums who've perhaps had maybe a yeast overgrowth or a bacterial overgrowth while they've been pregnant.
Right.
And the child, as the child's been born, they've not had the right commensal bacteria from birth, because the child gets its first inoculation of beneficial bacteria from the vaginal canal as it's been born. So
Right.
if it's not getting that because the mum's health's not optimum, or if it's not getting it because it's an emergency cesarean section, or even a vent house delivery or something like that, then that baby's not got a very good start in life. And then if it's not breastfed on top of that, then you just compound the problem. So it can be any or all of those, really.
So what kind of what kind of suggestions do you give for people to start healing the gut? I know in the free giveaway you've actually got a full section on perfect digestion, and it's brilliant because it's very, very simple. So whoever turned up live, this is it's a really sort of good free bonus. But sort of very quickly, what kind of advice can you give for people to start achieving perfect digestive health?
Well, I think first and foremost, you've got to clean the diet up. So you've got to get rid of all the sugars and all the refined carbohydrates initially. So all the white bread and white pasta. Move to whole grain as long as you can tolerate that. But again, it's a bit of it's individual. Some people can't. So it needs working. But lots of nice fruits and vegetables and good wholesome foods.
Yes.
And then to get the beneficial bacteria back swinging, if you like. Lots of fermented foods, so things like natto and yogurt and kefir. You can make all that at home, so you get the best benefits. Sauerkraut's another one, so lots of things like that really help. And then to heal the gut, if you can make bone broths like your grandma used to do, that's absolutely fabulous. It's nourishing, it's healing. And then to improve digestive, what the Chinese call digestive fire, you want nice warming herbs and warming foods. So you want the nice brightly coloured vegetables in your stews, and you want things like cinnamon and garlic, which are all nicely warming foods.
Right.
They help to create digestive fire. So really what you need to do is absolutely go back to what your grandma used to do.
Yeah, back to before all the processed foods and the fast food restaurants and the fast food joints came. Fast food joints came in. It's really going back to good, wholesome, clean living, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and the thing is, where can obviously you talked about fermented foods. Now these are big. These are sort of I'm getting some guests on to talk about fermented foods, especially because I've read so many success stories, not just for gut health, but again for lowering cholesterol, and again for sort of lowering diabetes, etc. So I need to get some. I'm working on some guests to come on to talk about that, but. It's a process. People need to learn the process of making these. So until they learn that process, people, they can buy them from health food shops. From what should they look for when they're buying these sort of foodstuffs?
To be honest, it's much simpler to make your own, because if you're buying them from the supermarkets and the health food shops, they've been stored for quite a long time.
Yeah.
And I'm quite sure of of the value of them.
Yes.
You're not quite sure of the quality.
Yes.
And fermented foods, they don't take any making. It's not like you have to cook forever and
No.
having to slave over a stove. You're literally chopping vegetables,
Yes.
putting them in some water, and
Yes.
maybe putting a starter in the same way as you would with your yogurt. So
Yes.
these things can just sit in your kitchen somewhere.
Yes.
And I think that's the best approach, to be fair.
Yes.
And you're taking ownership.
Yeah, I know you're right. I agree.
There's a beautiful little book by a lady called Sally Fallon, which is
I've heard of. Yeah.
And she's got all the recipes in there, and nothing takes more than a few minutes of prep.
Is this Sally Fallon from the Western A Price?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, she's my next guest. Brilliant, nourishing foods, going back to traditions. Yeah, she's my next guest next week, I think it is. So I'm so excited to have her on. So Anne's advice is make your own, and Sally's book, and also if you search online, I mean, you can normally tell the quality of the website. You can normally sort of, tell if it's got a good about me section, if the website looks good and the recipes look reasonable, it's probably a good one to follow, because I've been sort of looking for loads of things online, and that's normally how I gauge if something is worth following up.
Yeah.
But these fermented foods, do they actually have better probiotics than someone who just goes out and buys probiotics? Is there a difference between sort of, the natural ones in these foodstuffs or just shop-bought ones?
Yes, I would say so, because with the shop-bought ones, you're talking about a supplement in some respects. You might be talking about the fermented food, but as I say, we don't know how long it's been on the shelf. They've often got really long shelf lives, so we don't know about the quality of the bacteria by the time we're eating it. And we don't know what other additives have been put in that product. With supplements, there's a kind of a process where they have to be guaranteed a certain amount of probiotic bacteria by the time you take them.
Right.
Not every supplement company subscribes to that. So you've really got to be very careful about where you buy them from, who you buy them from, just the same as you have with the food, and probably more so with a supplement, because it's far more expensive.
Yeah, very, very much so. So the best advice is make your own. Very simple to do. Just make your own on a weekend.
Or even, if you can afford it, to actually see a practitioner, so that at least you're guided to get the best ones.
Yes.
If you really want to go the supplement route, and to be fair, you can do most things with food. You don't have to take loads of supplements. Mm-hmm. But if you really have to go that route, I would always say get some really good advice.
Yes. Yeah, no, it makes sense. And if people wanted to get in touch with you, Anne, how could they get in touch with you?
Well, my website is www.nutrimed.co.uk, so they can get in touch by that route. They can phone. Am I allowed to put all this information on here?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, we can. I mean, I can email it out later on. So there is ways to get in touch with yourself. Brilliant. And the other day I had this was before we start going on to the questions round. Because again, I read this a lot in forums, and I read this a lot in sort of groups. And if there was one tip that you could give sort of to loosen stool so people become more regular, what would that be?
Right. Flaxseed is my absolute favourite.
Wow.
If you get ground flaxseed, and you have, what I say to my clients is, you have to find your own dose, because this is personalised medicine or personalised food.
Yes.
And so, but I normally say between 1 and 3 tablespoons per day.
Right.
Make sure you drink plenty of water with it, and you can either sprinkle that onto your breakfast, or you can have it on some yogurt with some berries at some point in the day, or you can just put it into water and drink it as a drink. But what the flaxseed does is it's got essential oils, so it harmonises the bowel, and it helps to give the stool kind of a slippery quality, so it moves better.
Oh, brilliant.
It also absorbs water, so it fluffs up the stool so that the peristalsis that's going on within the bowel can be used to move the stool down.
Right, brilliant.
And I just find with most people that generally works. If it doesn't work, then there's a mechanical problem somewhere or a dysbiosis problem that needs to be addressed. But usually that works a treat, and that's my first thing to try usually.
Well, yeah, I whiz them up in my smoothie every day, so I get my sort of flax seeds every day like that. And you can have them over breakfast cereals as well, can't you? And
I think the other thing that that you need to be aware of as well is whether you're taking in fluid, because obviously dehydration is one of the major causes of constipation or sluggish bowels. And so you really need to make sure that you're drinking enough to, because the large bowel absorbs water, and if you're not drinking enough and your body's dehydrated, it'll take it from your stool, so the stool will become hard and it'll be unable to pass. So even just increasing your fluid intake can make a difference.
oh wow, that's amazing. So really, if you're drinking a lot of tea and coffee, I mean, we hear this over and over again, you should be drinking more water because that's going to make you go easier. And you know, one food and something that people can take to stop them going, because that's another problem. You know, it's a nightmare to get out the house in the morning. It's a nightmare to do any traveling because we're just, you know, it's embarrassing. So one sort of food to stop the movement so quick.
Okay.
And the thing is, you know, these are essentials. You know, people are, you know, that they're controlling people's lives, but they're still very taboo. So anyway, we might as well talk about it.
We don't like to talk about poo, do we?
No, no, we don't. But you know, like I said, it's a big part. It affects a lot of people, so it's essential we do.
Yeah, well, again, flaxseed can do the job because of the way it works for both. Bananas can be good for both constipation and diarrhea, but you've just got to be careful with bananas that you're not overloading on sugar because they are a very high sugar food.
Yes.
But the other thing you could try is psyllium husks.
Yeah, psyllium husks. That's a big one.
Yeah.
Psyllium husk, and they can get that from sort of whole food shops and over the internet. Yes.
Yeah, they can just get that from Holland and Barrett, and it costs pennies. Really, it's not. In fact, if you get it from a herbal outlet online, you'll pay far less than you will from Holland and Barrett. You might pay £10 for a tub at Holland and Barrett, but if you just want pure psyllium husk, you can get it for about £2.50 from a herbal outlet. So it's kind of working round.
And one tip for bloating, because again, women get a lot more bloating than men, and what I read is because our sort of whole tract is a lot, or loop is a lot longer than men's, so there's more chance of something not working correctly down the tract. But how can you stop bloating? Because that's another big problem here, isn't it?
It certainly is, and sometimes that's hormones. And sometimes that's too many refined foods, and sometimes it's that you haven't got enough digestive enzymes. So you really need to have a look at why that's happening. But one of the nice foods that can stop the bloating, if it's just a short mechanical thing, is something like peppermint tea. That can go. Getting in the fermented foods, that really helps with bloating, because if you're going to rebalance the gut bacteria, that's a real step in the right direction.
Oh wow, that's big. Yeah, definitely. I'm going to start making my own and just posting them everywhere to show people how to do it, because it's a big one. So no, it's been fascinating. I'm sure our viewers and listeners took a lot away from that. But is there any questions? Now you're going to see me flicking through screens here, so I might have to disappear. But if you've got any questions, please, right at the bottom of this page, you can get your questions in. And Anne's already given some fantastic advice. So any particular areas that you know of digestive health that you'd like Anne to answer, get your questions in now. I'm going to have to flip now onto my other screen, and so I'm going to disappear for 5 minutes. Okay. Right, I've got a question. I've got a question from Mary O'Mara, and she was asking about sort of ideas for food, breakfast ideas, lunch ideas, just ideas for suppers as well that are going to reduce her acid.
Okay, hello Mary. With the acid, it's people often think they've got too much acid, and quite often they don't have enough. So you need to establish, first of all, are you a too low acid or a too high acid? If you have got too much acid, you need to think about things that upset that, and that can be high fat foods, highly spiced foods, chocolate, coffee, anything that's a stimulant, and reducing those while keeping that whole food diet concept that we talked about earlier. If you've got low stomach acid, and if you're having trouble digesting food generally, and in particular things like your red meat, not that we should be eating loads of red meat, but people who have difficulty digesting proteins, they might feel tired or bloated straight after a heavy meal. Something like apple cider vinegar can help with that.
Right.
And you just take a couple of teaspoons of apple cider vinegar with your meal to help you to digest it.
Right.
But you've got to establish which one it is first.
Right. Right. Okay. Brilliant. I've got another question from Asma Talib, and she says, if you start taking supplements with enzymes, is there any side effects?
There shouldn't be. The side effects should be that your digestion should improve, and it should improve quite quickly. If you do get side effects, then you need to be speaking to someone who has the knowledge to help you to put that right, really, because that shouldn't be happening.
Yeah. I mean, would you know? Okay, all right. So you shouldn't really be getting any side effects with that.
You should get an improvement. If the enzymes are the thing that is missing for you, and you start to take enzymes, you should see an improvement in wind and bloating and the passage of stool. If you're not seeing that, then the chances are enzymes are not your problem. Your problem's somewhere else.
Something else. And she's also asking, is there a relationship between constant hunger and IBS?
Can be, but that's often because people with IBS tend to eat foods that are more easily digested.
Yes.
So they tend to go for the highly refined foods. And when you've got highly refined foods with not a lot of protein and not a lot of fat to sustain the release of sugar, you get blood sugar bounces.
Oh.
So the sugar goes high because of the refined foods, and then it quickly drops.
Right.
And
right.
that can cause those kind of symptoms.
Problems. Okay. Oh, and one last question. The other day, this is an interesting one. The other day, I took a quote from some of the literature that you sent me, and it was just that good for food to be digested properly. It has to ferment in a certain way, and if it doesn't ferment in a certain way, it becomes toxic. And I've had so how does that happen? How does it have to ferment in a certain way before it becomes toxic?
Well, it goes back to that balance of gut bacteria.
Yes.
You should have, roughly speaking, and we don't know exactly, we just kind of make an educated guess, you should have 80% good bugs and 20% bad bugs, which might be yeast or fungi or mold or bacteria. But if you've got the wrong balance, if you've got the right balance and the food is fermented and then it's metabolized and vitamins, etc., are extracted from it to make you to sustain life, so to speak.
Yes.
If you've got the wrong bacteria, then they ferment the wrong stuff. So for an example, if you've got a yeast overgrowth because you've had a lot of antibiotics or a lot of steroids, then the yeast ferments the sugar in the foods, and that creates alcohol.
Oh, right.
So it's that kind of situation.
Right. Okay. Yeah. It's I think it's fascinating stuff. This is. I'm back to Mary O'Mara. Is there specific kind of Is there specific kind of like food ideas, you know, like that she could have for breakfast, you know, because she was asking me this as well, like what do you eat for your breakfast? Is there, you know, that would sort of help with the acid in her stomach?
Yeah, I tend to go for something like a nutty porridge, which is
Yes.
quite soothing. Um, so she could have a basic porridge or a
Yes.
muesli, which
Yes.
is, if you went for a sugar-free muesli, that would be good.
Yes.
And then to be careful with the milk, because milk can be quite acid forming.
Yes.
And
Yes.
if that upsets her, then I would switch to a nut milk and rotate the milks, or even a coconut milk is nicely soothing for the digestive tract. So that would be a good start.
You know, you need to write a book with recipe plans, you know, even if it's 7 day, because I'm actually getting a lot of this. So I'm gonna start. I mean, I've managed to control my own symptoms for a couple of years now because I eat in a certain way. But I'm gonna, yeah, you need to write a book, and I'm gonna have to get on this as well because it's a really kind of popular question. But you have got a book out, haven't you, Anne?
Yeah, I come off it with Dr. Damien Downing. I've been working with him for about 4 years now. What we did with that book was we have a lot of clients who have a lot of quite serious health issues, and we wanted to make it easier for them to actually start the process and do the basic digestive work themselves. So that book, what it does is it goes through kind of the anatomy of the digestive system, and it goes from mouth to anus.
Yes.
And it tells you how that particular section works when it's normal, what happens when things start to become abnormal,
Right.
what you do to correct it. So there is a specific diet in the back of that.
Right.
There are meal ideas.
Oh, brilliant.
There are supplements. So we've gone right the way through.
Brilliant.
And for someone of average intelligence, they should be able to pick that book up and be able to more or less sort their own digestive problems out from that. And I think a key thing for me was near to the back of the book, there's one page which has got an algorithm.
Yes.
And so it's a big circle, and it tells you, you start at the top, and it's asking you if you've got low or high stomach acid and how to find that out. And if you've done that and that's okay, you move to the next bit, which is digestive enzymes, and then to the next bit, which is testing your gut bacteria. And you just go around in this circle till you've found every little bit that is pertinent to you and what you do about it. And it's all in the book.
Oh, brilliant. And if people wanted the book, where could they get it from?
They can get it from Amazon, or I've got a few copies in my cupboard. So if anybody wants one direct, I can sell them direct.
And it's the vitamin cure for digestive disease. That's correct.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So
quite a fun book, actually. It's got some quite good anecdotes in it, because Dr. Downing's got quite a dry sense of humour, as have I. So we've put a lot of humour into it because you have to when you're talking about poo.
Yeah, you do, definitely.
But also there's some case studies in there, so hopefully when you're reading through, you'll get to the case studies and some people will recognise themselves there, because we've chosen cases that come into the practice every day.
Oh, you had some case studies. So very quickly, just before we round off, you want to, because I always like to give case studies and how nutrition has healed someone or how someone came in for, you know, because we're talking in this series about why digestive health is so important for everyone, and why it actually is good for sort of a lot of functions of the body. So you've actually had clients, patients that have come in for another disorder and you've related it back to digestive health and healed them, and they've been fine, haven't they?
Yeah. The first one is a gentleman. He was 47. And he'd had a lot of stress in his life, and he had a really high-powered job, and he was a type A personality, so he worked hard and he played hard and he ran marathons, you know, the typical run yourself into the ground. And
yes.
Unfortunately, he had a diagnosis of chronic fatigue, but his most important symptoms were he was feeling really sleepy after meals, and he had these dizzy spells that he really couldn't get on top of. So we sat and we looked at his diet, and he was eating a lot of refined stuff, which was upsetting his blood sugar balance, and he wasn't digesting well either. So what we did was we put him on a paleo diet.
Yes.
We gave him some digestive enzymes and some probiotics.
Yes.
And we gave him a little bit of apple cider vinegar to help him digest his proteins better. And it probably took about 4 or 5 months for him to really come back. I mean, he does other things as well, because he does all the deep breathing, and
yes.
we've had to really evaluate his life because of his fatigue.
Yes.
We've had to stop being a type A in inverted commas, or what's the word? Kind of channel his energy better so that he can recognise when he's overdoing it. So there's been a lot of practical things, but they were the key things with him. And then the other one that comes to mind is a lady who came with asthma.
Yes.
And for her, she had a few food intolerances which were related to sulfites, and sulfites are kind of things that they put into wine and sausages and bacon as preservatives. So she had those problems, but she also had low stomach acid.
Right.
She thought she had acid, and when we tested her, we did a proper test for her, because of the nature of her asthma it was quite severe, and she was quite frightened by it. So what we did was we did what we call a gastro test, and we tested the amount of stomach acid she had, and then we slowly put stomach acid back for her, because what was happening was, because she wasn't digesting her proteins, the carbohydrates that she ate with that protein were fermenting inside her gut.
Oh, wow.
Particularly, and so that because her gut was then leaky, it was creating asthma. So she not only had the sulfites, she had the poor digestion as well. She made a full recovery. That was excellent.
Oh, brilliant. No, that's excellent news. And so just one final thing, even if people don't have any symptoms, they're fine, they don't have any digestive problems, how can they carry on looking after their systems? Because obviously, it is imperative to overall health. So what can you recommend for people that don't actually have any problems, but just to ensure that they're keeping a healthy stomach?
I would say back to basics, and make sure that at least for 80% of the time they eat a really good diet. Plenty of salads to get the digestive enzymes and the rawness, fibre. A mixture of cooked and raw. Plenty of fermented foods to get the probiotic bacteria in there. Yes. And above all, make sure you don't get constipated.
And you've given some really good tips for that. So no, that's brilliant. So that's Anne Pemberton. You can find her book on Amazon. I'll leave Anne's details on my Facebook page should you need it. And what I'm also going to do is put an opt-in page up so for future shows, because I've got some fantastic guests coming up now in the next couple of weeks. So I'm going to put another opt-in page on, so you can keep informed of the guests and the times. And and it's been fantastic to have you on today. Thank you very much. So over and out from me, Sabrina Khan, Fuel Yourself Fabulous.tv, and Anne Pemberton.